Qatar, I mean, set out back in 2008 with the national vision. And that had a mission statement, which is to transition Qatar to what we call a knowledge-based economy. In terms of the share of GDP, today 65% of our GDP is non-hydrocarbon. And I think to make the bullish case for Qatar, there's three kind of key trends that will drive future growth. One is energy. And I think when you're looking at the build out of AI compute, global demand, which is kind of projected to be between 60 to 70 gigawatts of AI compute capacity that's needed in the next decade. With our energy competitiveness, the sustainability profile of our base load, we're building that out. It is the gold rush today.
This idea of sovereignty is a theme that we're all hearing over and over this week, and historically that's been really dominant. Talking about infrastructure, compute. Let's get compute sovereignty, and the way we think about this is, I think, a little bit broader. So we think about data sovereignty, compute, algorithms, governance, and an ecosystem. And an ecosystem play, I think, is something that Qatar has been ahead of and has been a leader on.
Qatar traditionally has been a stepping stone for talent in the wider region, South Asia, moving to Qatar and then transitioning to Europe and the US. Today, it is an end destination in itself, and we're rolling out new programs around permanent residency that basically, we want people to see Qatar as a home, to live here, to bring their families, and to grow their businesses.
One thing we've been doing with Qatar beyond just investment is how can we help our companies really use Qatar as a springboard for the wider region. And I think that's what makes it unique. I mean, it's incredible that when you go to a place like Qatar that, I could just WhatsApp Sheikh Ali and meet with him and tell him what I need, and suddenly the government moves and gets things done. That's great. It makes things a little bit better. Ultimately, everything that we do is driven by human capital.
And I'll say one thing on the human capital that is, I think, unique to the Middle East is there's a bit of a renaissance happening. There's things are changing very rapidly, and we see a lot of folks that maybe grew up in Jordan and went to school at Stanford and they work at Stripe, and there's a real appeal to them to have companies, really cutting edge technology companies, particularly in AI, that are in the region, and they get to go back and really drive impact there. And it's something that it's a huge boon for us in terms of recruiting.
Our belief is you're going to see global companies being built not only in Silicon Valley, which will remain a really big place, but that you're going to see global companies built from places like Doha because of the human capital, the financial capital, and it's the predictability of markets. We don't need markets to be perfect, but we need governments and markets to be predictable, and we need access to liquidity.
If you're looking at building new sectors, maybe higher risk, where the private sector either does not have the capital or the risk appetite to deploy there, that's where public sector equity funds can play a role. And Qatar's bet is not really just on ourselves. I mean, for us, our bet is on the entire region, and our growth is going to be basically contingent on the growth of our nexus markets.
I think that investment in data is quite important. My advice is always think hard about the data, have the conversation, and then start using it and start applying to the things that you're most excited about. And I think that's going to teach you a lot about your readiness.
There is a primary calculus around what's the best bang for our buck, right? Especially when it comes to public spending. And there's various different programs, whether it's R&D grants, incentives. We at Invest Qatar manage around $1 billion in incentives that we deploy to projects in various different sectors. And as well, what you're trying to do is to make it competitive. And usually that's kind of a bet on the ecosystem. And a subsidy is good until it runs out. But I think that comes down to when you're talking about cluster development, that's really this kind of trifecta of government, academia, and the private sector. Now, foreign direct investment does play a role. Having growth in the academic programs that also supports their long-term sustainability to have a presence in Qatar. They need the talent throughput. They need the pipeline that they will depend on. And Qatar has grown when you look at the educational ecosystem, healthcare, infrastructure, connectivity, safety. But I mean, we need to develop as well the domestic throughput and to have also their input from the private sector to the universities and what kind of caliber of talent that is well equipped for them today. Public sector support has many various aspects to it, facilitation, business development, as well as policies, legislation, and as well as support programs such as funding. Now, I guess the key kind of indicators to see private capital deployment when it comes to support, and I think the moment when we see private capital eclipse public funding, that's where we see kind of we've met our target.